We still are, absolutely, yeah.
Let me go get that last bit of coffee.
So today, which is the full moon day, or the 5th month of the Tibetan calendar, also coincides with a slightly different calendar system, which is the lunar calendar system in Southeast Asia and South Asia. Basically, the lunar calendar in South and Southeast Asia and East Asia and North Asia, being what we call the lunisolar calendar, it basically follows the moon in calculating, so 30 days a month. But then to stabilize this 30 days a month calendar of 12 months, stabilize it in terms of planting, right? Seasonal, because you have 360 days. If you don't stabilize it, then, you know, all seasons of the year could be your first month, second month, third month, you know. So the lunisolar, they call it the lunisolar, as in it takes into consideration the position of the sun in relation to where you are. So anyway, the lunisolar calendar, because they need to introduce a way to stabilize it, so often an extra month is added every few years. So we have our leap year is just an extra day, because we only need to account for about a day. You know, even our solar calendar, it's, you know, you need to account for about a day every, you know, 4 or 5 years. In the lunisolar calendar, you need to account for a month. So now where they add the extra month varies, like from culture to culture, areas to areas. So the Southeast Asia calendar and the North Asian, which is Tibetan, Bhutanese, they are 1 month apart right now. So the Tibetan calendar is the 5th month. The South Asian calendar, Southeast Asian calendar is the 6th month. Yeah. So on the full moon of the 6th month, both the Tibetan tradition and the Southeast Asian tradition agree that on that full moon day was when Buddha Shakyamuni gave the first formal teaching to the world in the form of teaching the Four Noble Truths. That's called Turning the Wheel of Dharma in Deer Park, right outside of Varanasi, if you've been to those parts. So in the Southeast Asian calendar, today, the 6th month of full moon commemorates that occasion. The first turning of the wheel of Dharma. The Buddha taught the Four Noble Truths. Now, if we move up north to North Asia, in that calendar system, yes, it's still the full moon today, but it's the 5th month. Yeah. So for the 5th month full moon in the Himalayan Tibetan Buddhist traditions, it commemorates the successful completion of the building of Samye Monastery. Samye Monastery was the first formal monastery built in Tibet in the 8th century. So the Tibetan Dharma king called Trisong Detsen. There are 3 great Dharma kings in the history of Tibet. Trisong Detsen was the middle one. 2-3 generations before him, his great-grandfather, I think, by the name of Tsongsen Gampo, was the first one to formally kind of welcome the arrival of Buddhism. But during the reign of Tsongsen Gampo, no formal monastery was established, although chapels were established or temples were established to enshrine Buddha images, and people practice kind of devotional practices. But there were no ordination of monks yet at that point, no ordination of indigenous Tibetan monks during the time of Tsongtsen Gampo. So in Lhasa today, at the heart of Lhasa, the capital of Tibet, is this temple called the Jokang Temple. The Jokang Temple was built by Tsongtsen Gampo to enshrine this Buddha statue, which Tibetans believe came from India, but via China. So that statue, apparently, according to legend, was crafted during the time of the historical Buddha, and then somehow made its way to China. And then when Tsongtsen Gampo married one of the Chinese princesses, which is how ancient kings and kingdoms conducted foreign policy, marry off your daughters to your enemies, so your enemies will think twice before they attack you. So Tsongtsen Gampo took a Chinese wife, and part of the dowry was this statue that came with the wife. So it's in Lhasa now. Anyway, then 3-4 generations later, a Dharma king called Trisong Detsen made a much stronger effort to bring Buddha Dharma to Tibet. So at a certain point, he resolved that we now need to build a monastery whereby monks could be ordained, indigenous Tibetans could be ordained as Buddhist monks, they could be trained, and in due time, when they're properly trained, after the number of requisite years, you need to have at least 10 years before you can ordain other people to be monks. And this is the monastic rules. So in order to fulfill that, a monastery needed to be built. And so it's said that Trisong Detsen then put his resources into building this monastery. Eventually, the monastery was built, and the name is Samye. So to this day, Samye is there. Of course, having undergone many buildings and rebuildings, that site of Samye. Samye Monastery, therefore, is remembered as the first formal monastery built in Tibet. But it is, according to the stories, the building of Samye met with a number of obstacles. One of them was in the form of, the main one, was that whatever the king's builders built during the daytime, overnight, the spirits of Tibet would dismantle everything. So then the king initially kind of doubled the efforts and built more, then again it's dismantled the next morning. Then he put guards, to guard at night, thinking it's his human enemies obstructing his policy of introducing Buddhism to Tibet. Before long, the main Buddhist teacher that came from India, the abbot Shantarakshita, informed the king that the nature of this problem is not human. The nature of this problem is that the spirit beings of this area are not cooperating. So then Shantarakshita said, I can adequately deal with the human opposition, but I cannot deal with this spirit opposition. So Trisong Detsen said, then what can we do? And then Shantarakshita said, you need to look for this one person. Before I came from India, I think they never met, or they met, I don't remember, he said. But anyways, he said, there's this great individual, this great figure called Pemasambhava in India, when I left India to come here. You should seek him out and convince him to come. And if he comes, then he has the ability to deal with the non-human opposition. So then Trisong Detsen sent emissaries to India to look for Pema Sambhava, or affectionately now known as Guru Rinpoche, the precious Guru, the precious Lama. And so eventually Trisong Detsen, Pema Sambhava arrives, and then true enough, was able to work with the spirit opposition. So it said that from that point on, the humans will build Samye in the daytime and the spirits will build Samye in the nighttime. So they had a 24-hour work crew, completing Samye in no time. Then at the completion of that, Guru Rinpoche led all the humans in performing a smoke cleansing offering, a cleansing smoke offering called Sang, or Ha Sang, or Sang Chu. And that day is said to be the full moon day of the 5th month. So it's like a commemoration, a celebration of the Dharma, the beginning of the firm establishment of Dharma in Tibet. Whether it's Buddha Shakyamuni first teaching, or the Dharma being established in Tibet formally, the day. So it's we should remember this day and make the aspiration that the Dharma be firmly established, most importantly, in the ground of our minds, and then in the ground of wherever we live. And so we think of our own Dharma growing, then we should not forget the external vessel, which is the conditions for Dharma to grow in our lives. For many of you, your first reference point is EBS. So you have to think of EBS. You have to think of, how to ensure your Samye, to be strong and firm.
Yeah.
So
Here.
this is the day.
Yeah.
So think about that. Burn some incense if you want. But more importantly, really think about how both the external conditions for Dharma to be established, to be strong, to grow, as well as how that needs to happen within us. Because the external flourishing is meaningless completely, and can even become corrupt if the inner growth is missing. The inner growth cannot really grow if the external conditions are not. So interdependence of outer and inner. So that's today.
That's my favorite bedtime story about Lhasa. Thank you. I just
Now, time to go to bed.
I want to hear that every night before I go to bed. My favorite story.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Aisha.
She's invisible.
She's trying to get here.
Ah.
She's trying to get here.
Gate.
Yeah.
So, page 120 of our book. That is a really good. Actually, let's go to, 118, at the bottom of 118. That section that starts with, then the Jitsun again went to the Enlightenment Fortress in Rakma. While he stayed there, the benefactors from before offered their service to him, and his practice flourished. So they took care of his basic needs as he resided in Rakma, in this cave called the Fortress of Enlightenment. Then one day, two young cowherds came and met Milarepa. So the younger one asked him, doesn't the Lama have any companions staying with him? Is there anyone else with you? And he replied, yes, I have. Then it's like, oh, what is his name or who is he? And he says, my companion is bodhicitta. So bodhicitta, as we know, yeah, literally is the awakened or awakening or enlightening and mind or heart or essence. And bodhicitta, literal meaning is that. Then from there we can say, in terms of this bodhicitta, there are two aspects or two phases, two aspects or two phases to bodhicitta. Bodhicitta being one, essentially, but it has two sides to it. So the relative side and the absolute side. The absolute phase and the relative phase. Phase and phase, both. Phase, as in, if you look at it from this phase, then there is a second phase. So in the iconography of Vajravarahi or Vajrayogini, the main phase, and then there is the sao protruding from the right side. In Nyingma traditions, usually protruding from the top of the head, but in Kagyu, it's protruding from the right. But I think now it's all mixed up. People just paint however they want to paint. But in the Kagyu side, it protrudes from the right. In the Nyingma, it protrudes from the top. Anyway, this Bo face, this Sao face, is the absolute face, and then the main face is the relative face. So bodhicitta being essentially one, then, but when we divide it into two phases, two aspects, is the wisdom aspect and the love and compassion aspect. Yeah. So when both of these are achieved, realized, that's the state of Buddha. So the state of Buddha is nothing but the full expansion, the full revelation, the full recognition, the full flourishing of bodhicitta. Bodhicitta with these two aspects. Then, in terms of relative bodhicitta, how that plays out in our practice, that is what we often call generating bodhicitta. And so at the beginning of our practices, at the beginning of the day, we make this resolve. We reaffirm this resolve that I shall practice the Dharma, I shall live my life so that it is geared towards, it is centered on the resolve to achieve the state of Buddha for the benefit of beings. In that expression, I shall achieve the state of Buddha. Once again, that's the wisdom aspect. For the sake or welfare of sentient beings, that's the love and compassion aspect. But here it's called relative bodhicitta because it's on the level of relative, relational existence. How does that get practiced? How does that get carried out? How does that play out? How does that unfold? It should unfold in this way, which is, so in that sense, right? It's not enough to just have love and compassion for beings. Because if your love and compassion isn't being funneled, so to say, or channeled into the task of awakening as Buddha, then all the love and compassion, in a way you could say, becomes kind of wasted. Because if you foolishly, right, that energy goes into like, oh, everybody should have French fries because I love French fries so much. That's some absurd example. Oh, then I need to get French fries for everyone, right? So if you spend your effort doing that, you know, it's not bodhicitta. That might be a fry chitta, you know, the mind of fries, not awakening mind.
Wow.
So relative bodhicitta is expressed in those terms of like, you know, I shall practice, I shall dedicate myself, my life, my goals to the freedom from suffering, attainment of happiness, genuine, meaningful happiness of all beings without exception. So that's the relative bodhicitta. Then relative bodhicitta has two aspects to it too. The aspirational aspect and the engagement aspect, compared often to the desire to go somewhere and then the resolve that is needed to actually go. Right? Often we desire something, but not enough motivation to get our heinies off the couch. Or in some cases, to get the fingers typing on the keyboard. You know, it's just, oh, I'm going to write this book. Oh, I'm going to design this program. Oh, but then, So both the determination to achieve the goal and the determination to therefore do what it takes, those are the two further aspects of relative bodhicitta. So here, coming back to Milarepa's answer, he said, I have a companion. My companion is bodhicitta. So when he says that, right, all of this that I just talked about, it's there, it's implied, it's included in there. So he says, my companion is bodhicitta. So then the boy asks, oh, well, where is this friend? Because of course, you know, for us, it might seem like this is like all just kind of pretending, you know, this encounter. But it's not, because Tibetan names are often Buddhist terms. So somebody could be called bodhicitta. So the boy probably like, oh, so where's this, you know, Bob guy that you say, you know, is your companion? Bob. Here, bodhicitta, Bob, right? Okay, well, where's Bob? And he goes, oh, right now, my companion is in the house of the all-base consciousness. So now probably the boy is like, oh, that's kind of weird. Like, so, and again, not so weird yet, right? Because even though this is a technical term, all-base consciousness, house, kang ba. So it's probably like kunshi, kunshi shepagi kangba, probably something like that. But then again, you know, like it's not yet, you know, they're not clicking yet for the boy that he's talking about something else. Because again, Tibetan place names often have these names, right? And it's like, so where's this house of the all-base consciousness? The answer now would clue the boy into, oh, wait, I'm asking something, he's answering something else. Now he says, it's right within my body. At that point, it says, you know, the older boy, the older cowherd is like, yeah. He says, you know, guru or lama, politely, but probably in the mind, it's like, this guy is a little bit out there. He says, you're not someone we should take refuge in. This is a very literal translation of take refuge. Again, maybe in English, you're like, you know, this seems contrived. Like who walks around talking like this, right? I mean, literally in Tibetan, it means we should not go to you for like protection. Like you're not reliable. You know, you're a little bit out there. So I said, yeah, we're going to go now. Okay, bye-bye. You know, it's sort of like this weirdo, you know. So the older of the two boys, yeah, it's like, yeah, we're gonna go now. But the younger one asks, wait, is the all-base consciousness the mind? And then is the body the mind's house? Milarepa says, yes, it is. So this all-base consciousness, he says, is the mind. And since Milarepa says this mind is dwelling in this body, then it's like, oh, so is this body the house? Milarepa said, yes. Then the boy further spoke. In a person's house, one person can be inside, or many people can be inside. So he's now, you know, it's like, so if you use the analogy of house, in a house, there could be one person or several persons. So then he goes, so within the body, is there then one mind, or are there many minds? How many are there? And what are they like? Then Milarepa knows, okay, now this boy, he has the karmic stuff. Mm-hmm. He has the store of merit. Now I'm going to instruct him. So he says, you know, as to whether there is one or many minds, you should look and see for yourself. Very well, the younger boy said. And so then he left with the older cowherd. So they left. A very believable encounter. And this is also, you see an insight into a much more less codified, less organized, less, you know, rigid approach to teaching. Because he doesn't start with and say, oh, let's start with the Hinayana, first renunciation, then we go to Mahayana, then we, no, you know. In fact, he went straight at what we would call pointing out instructions. He went straight to, in a way, right? These cowherds, or this particular cowherd, is very fortunate. In that, I mean, he's fortunate in many ways. He met Milarepa, great fortune. But in a way, you know, he's even very fortunate because he has not, you know, we can probably guess from this, he has not learned a single Buddhist vocabulary. And all the propaganda and all the books, you know, that we have read. So no preconceptions, no. So his answers to Milarepa is not going to come from some book that he read. He has no book to read but his own mind. He has no information that he can just parrot back to Milarepa. Of course, if he parrots back the information, Milarepa, given his level of attainment, he can just see the bullshit and cut the bullshit. But these days, you know, we don't have that kind of teachers, or not so easy to come by. And even if they come by, we probably would take offense and say, oh, this guy, so full of himself. And we're like, well, I'm going to go look for someone else. Right?
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, sure.
Well, when they ask him, by the time this is happening, there are monasteries, right? Mm-hmm. So when they ask him about companions, are they asking him about his credentials? In a way, are they saying, wait, where are all your monks? Where's your, if you're such a big deal,
right?
Where's all your retinue or your whatever?
Yeah, here is more, not necessarily monks. But, I mean, they could recognize, right? This is a wandering yogi. Yeah. So I think to me, it indicates more, it could be, asking for credentials, sure. It could also be like, it's more common to see these wandering yogis wandering together.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, it's more, I think, just like, you know, so are you alone? Are you with other people? Or, you know, what's your deal? You know, I think it's more in that sense. I think that there's a certain innocence to these cowherds.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're just curious, you know, like, who are you? What's your deal?
Yeah. Okay.
And Milarepa wasn't very known, you know, I think that I would say even within his lifetime, like at the end of this book, you know, he still wasn't very known, I would say, you know.
Okay.
I've often said, you know, if not for Gampopa, Milarepa would not be remembered today.
Okay.
It's Gampopa's prominence and Gampopa took a very different route, right? Gampopa, first of all, more or less parked himself somewhere instead of like Milarepa, you know, like wandering the different mountain ranges. Milarepa didn't want to have buildings and, you know, storages to manage. In a sense, you could say Gampopa's vision was different. Yeah? And so Gampopa established a fixed point. Then disciples gathered. Then Gampopa also followed the monastic ideal of, you know, establishing a community, ordaining monks, you know, training monks. And then Gampopa attracted a lot of disciples like that, and also very able and prominent disciples who then, you know, propagated this particular lineage, this particular style. And so today we have Kagyu, because I think chiefly because of Gampopa. And Gampopa's background training was in the Kadampa lineage, which is the lineage of Atisha. So he combined Atisha's Kadampa lineage with Milarepa's, you could say, like more yogic, you know, homeless, wandering, ascetic lineage. He combined those two.
I'm sorry, but can I just ask too for clarity? Is Gampopa, I know he was his student, Milarepa's student.
Yes.
So did he make him famous during Milarepa's lifetime, or was it afterwards?
I think afterwards, yeah.
After, okay.
If the evidence that we have, which is actually quite scanty, quite not, you know, not a lot, but of the little evidence that we have that we can date back to around that time. By the way, this song of this volume, right? It was compiled several centuries later by this person, Changnyeong Heruka.
Yeah, okay.
Then the book Life of Milarepa, that's also Changnyeong Heruka who composed several centuries later. Yeah. So if we want to be, you know, very historical about it, we will say these are all from several centuries later.
Yeah.
But we do have, I mean, it's not the case that, you know, Milarepa was just kind of a composite made up character necessarily. It's not. We do have enough evidence that tells us that no, this person existed. This person, you know, had these, the general contours of Milarepa's life is not disputed. Then, right, among Kagyupas today, we say Gampopa was the main successor to Milarepa. Yeah. But it does seem like in Milarepa's own time, it wasn't Gampopa. And you could see that, you know, Gampopa's style is just so different from Milarepa. Mm. Yeah. And to me, you know, it's not so much like, oh, then Gampopa, like, you know, I mean, you could say, oh, Gampopa kind of like turned Milarepa into something else to fit his model. I don't feel that way. I just feel like this just shows us, you know, there's so many different styles that you could be teacher and disciple in the most important and meaningful way without needing to ape whatever your teacher's style is. Yeah, often one modern example would be, you know, a outrageously, however you want to define outrageous, we can all agree outrageous, Chogyam Trungpa.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of his most famous, if not his most famous successor is Pema Chodron. I mean, very different styles, my goodness.
Yeah. Yes.
So Milarepa and Gampopa is sort of like that, you know. I mean, Milarepa wasn't outrageous in ways that Trungpa was, but in his own time, you know, he was outrageous. And then you have Gampopa, a goody two shoes,
Yeah.
establishing monastery, being, prim and proper, and, you know, you can invite to your extended family's gathering because he's going to carry himself well. But it seems like in Milarepa's own time, Rei Chongpa was his main person. But Rei Chongpa lived the way Milarepa lived, wandered from place to place, mountain range to mountain range. And again, you know, if Milarepa's legacy was left to Rei Chongpa, we probably won't hear much of Milarepa today. But because of Gampopa, so things have come down to us.
So how many other
Thank
ones
you.
are out there that nobody knows about?
Oh,
How many
yeah.
Milarepas are out there?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
You know, and Om Tupten talks about his teacher that nobody that some kind of, you know, kind of like Milarepa. But I mean that nobody even knows or
Yes.
has ever heard of. And you
Yeah.
know, that's who he says is his teacher.
A lot of these, what we call hidden yogis, you know, that they really, you know, don't want to be known.
Yeah.
And, you know, so no Facebook, no Instagram, you know, like they really, you know, don't want to be known, you know. In some ways, these are the true holders of the lineage, you know, the essence. I'm not saying that those who are known are not, you know, but they play a different role, you know.
Right. But I mean, they're, you know, just knowing that they're, you know, all those that
exactly.
know.
Yeah. So here, so Milarepa tells the boy. So these are all very good questions. So Milarepa says, you know, well, whether there's one or many, you go and you look tonight. Then come back sometime and let's talk then, right? So the next morning, the younger one went back to see the Jitsun, to see Milarepa, and said, Lama, okay, here my editorial obsession. This could be edited better. Sometimes guru, sometimes lama. Someone wasn't paying attention. Basically, the Tibetan word is lama, you know, then the editorial choice of the translator, sometimes guru, sometimes lama. So anyway, Lama, I look to see how many minds there are and what they are like. I found there is no more than one. So at this point, he says, you know, no more than one. So this, you know, there is no more than one. To me, you know, maybe reading too much into it, but there's some meaning there, you know. It's almost like he's saying, I'm not sure if there is one. But no more than one is what I'm thinking now. Yeah. And the rest kind of shows that, yeah, he's a little hesitant to say there is even one, right? Because he says, if you try and kill it, you can't kill it. If you try to overpower it, you can't. If you try to seize it, you can't grasp it either. If you try to push it down, you can't push it down. If you place it, it won't stay. If you try to tell it to stay, right, it won't stay. If you try to get it to go away, it won't. If you try to gather it so that it's not so scattered, meaning, I feel that it's kind of scattered here, there. You try to gather it, it won't gather. If you look at it, you can't see it. But then from the corner of your eye, so to see, you get glimpses of it, like a phantom. But when you try to actually turn and look at it, you can't see it. If you examine it, meaning if you investigate, try to probe, it says you can't find it. If you think it exists, it won't show itself. But if you think it doesn't exist, it's like it's spread all over the place. Then this next line is a very much you find this used in the Kagyu Mahamudra tradition. This expression in Tibetan, rik rik tur tur, especially. Then this was also tre tre yao yao badi, the footnote down there. But rik rik tur tur is a very common one. It doesn't have it's an onomatopoeia, so it doesn't have an exact translation. But it's translated here as it flickers and flutters, bounces and bounds, flashes and disappears. And so in the footnote, the translators say, Genpo Sundrin Gyamso, for example, have said, basically, these are experiential terms. These are not technical terms found in the dictionary, which is, it have the meaning of rapid movement in the sense of flickering, darting, and hopping. So this mind is flickering. So I've translated recently. I was working on a text. I was editing a translation of Jigten Sumgön's teachings, and it uses that term, rik rik tur tur. So my translators, who are very good, they have not come across this. They are more Nyingma in their training, and so then they thought it was like Rigpa, because Rig. I said no. It's, well, of course it's related to Rigpa, but here it's a very specific context of Kagyu Mahamudra. It emphasizes that when you look at the mind, this is part of the pointing out instructions. When you look at the mind, you will see that sometimes it's strong, sometimes it's weak, sometimes it's clear, sometimes it's fuzzy. So it's bopping, right? And it's like it's darting around. It flickers, right? It flutters. So this is, like this boy is now getting to know the mind. And it says, I can't say what it is at all. Please, Lama, teach me. What is it? Mm-hmm. What is it? So in Kagyu Mahamudra, like one of the beginnings of instructions on meditation beyond, categories of shamatha, vipassana, when you're being led to understand the mind, this instruction on seeing the flickering nature of awareness is an important part of the training. You don't try to stabilize it. Yeah, you don't try to like make it not flutter and not flicker. In fact, it says you leave it alone. Because the purpose here is not to stop it from flickering. The purpose here is to see its flickering, fluttering, hopping, darting around behavior. Then he says, caretaking herder, now listen to me. The wonderful taste of candy so sweet, by hearing its qualities, you won't experience it. You can think all about it, but you won't have the taste. To experience the taste, you must use your tongue. Likewise, as to the essence of mind, another person can point it out, but at that point, you won't be able to see it at all. Then, or I would say, but however, because of that previous occasion, the occasion of someone pointing it out to you, that's what it's referring to, because of that previous occasion, if you now look for your mind, you'll see it for sure. Herder, you should work with your mind this way. So Gampopa is, Milarepa is saying, I'm not going to go into lengths telling you about, the mind is this way and that way and this way and that way. He says, because that's like, candy. You have to taste it with your own tongue. So go back, and continue doing what you were doing. Searching for this mind. Looking at this mind. So when Milarepa had sung this, the boy replied, then please, Lama, give me this pointing out instruction, and I will search this evening and return tomorrow morning to tell you what I find. So he said, so okay, now I understand that I need to taste it with my own tongue, but do this pointing out. Do this introduction. So Milarepa said, tonight, look and see if you can tell me what color mind is. Is it red? Is it white? Search like that. Then look to see what kind of shape it has. Is it oblong? Is it round? Then look from your head down to the soles of your feet to see where the mind actually abides. Again, there is great advantage to the simplicity and uneducated, so to say, circumstance of this cowherd. For us, we're probably going to go, oh, mine is beyond color, mine is beyond shape. We have this like standard answers that we have already read about. But for the boy, this is really fresh. This is the first time he's thinking about this mind, And then, oh, well, maybe it has a color. Maybe it has a shape. And so he goes. In the morning, sun came up, the boy, led his cows up the hill, then he went to see Milarepa. Milarepa said, so, did you search? He said, yes, I did, Now the boy answers. Milarepa said, so tell me, what did you see? What is it like? He says, it moves. And it is clear and luminous. There's a certain brightness about it. There's a certain radiance about it. It is not something I can identify, though. I couldn't find any color or shape that it has. But, he says, together with the eyes, I can see, or it can see. With the ears, it can hear. Together with the nose, it smells. With the tongue, it tastes. With the feet, it walks. But it's a total mismatch, a complete disaster, he said. So a certain, like struggle is going on now. It's like on the one hand, I can see, I can see that it's clear, that it moves, it's radiant. But on the other hand, it's just like, I cannot put my finger on it, it's a complete disaster. Then he goes further, and this is like, it's basically a teaching for us. He says, this present body is just the servant of the mind. He understood that. When the body is happy, the mind uses it until it degenerates and becomes old. So youth, when the body is happy, then at that time, the mind, because the mind wants to experience, have more experiences, more, experiences of pleasure and excitement and all that, Then when it has completely deteriorated, the mind just throws it out like a stone used to wipe your behind. So now, the next COVID-19 emergency, and that aisle in the supermarket is out of toilet paper. Now you know what Tibetans used to do. Yeah. It's like a stone used to wipe your behind. Then you throw it away. And the mind goes on its way just like a spoiled little kid. So when the body cannot do the mind's bidding, the mind even treats the body like, it's a toilet paper. Used toilet paper. Used toilet paper. Then when the body tries to get retribution on the mind can't just stay there, relaxed at ease. So now the body is going to wreak some revenge. Because of the suffering that ensues, the body tramples on the mind like a herd of animals in order to stop it. When the body falls asleep at night, the mind goes everywhere just as it pleases. The body gives the mind such a hard time. When the body tries to take ownership of the mind, things just get worse and worse. And so this is a very, clear understanding of how the body and the mind, get at each other. Right now, I think it describes, our relationship with body and body with mind, and as Paul says, the spirit is willing, the body is weak. And then when the body is strong, then the spirit abuses it, and the mind abuses it. Work more, do more for me, do more for me. And then when the body is deteriorated, the mind throws a tantrum. We get upset that the body is not cooperating. Son, caretaking herder, listen here. Milarepa's response. Within this body, the meeting point of awareness and matter is consciousness that has such great negativity. Its experience of the lower realm suffering is reversed through the abandonment of samsara. Do you wish to go, O noble son, to the higher realms, that city of freedom? If you wish to go, I can take you there. So Milarepa says, yes, this body is the meeting point of awareness, of the mind and matter. But right now, this awareness, this mind is consciousness that has such great negativity. And why negativity? Because it's addicted to experiencing the lower realms. But you can reverse this, he says, by abandoning samsara, by abandoning a confused existence. So he says, do you wish to go there? If you wish, I can take you there. Oh, yes, you must. Please accept me. And Milarepa asks him, what is your name? And he says, Genyen, meaning like a lay person. Genyen. He says, Sanje Kyap. Sanje is Buddha. Kyap is protect. So protected by the Buddha. How old are you? I'm 16. So then at that point, Milarepa gave him refuge, explained the benefits of going for refuge, and said to him, from this evening on, do not break your refuge vows. Now go tonight and investigate. Are you who go for refuge, body or mind? So as an external reference point, Milarepa now gives him refuge vows and say, formally now you take refuge in Buddha, take refuge in Dharma, take refuge in Sangha. And when you take refuge in Buddha, here are the things that you should do. And here are the things that you should not do once you have taken refuge in Buddha. Now that you've taken refuge in Dharma, here are the things that you should do, and here are the things that you should not do. These are the attitudes to cultivate, and these are the attitudes to avoid. So he gave him all the guidelines. Yeah. So there's that level of practice, of instructions, and the practice that Milarepa says you should do. But then, even within that, he's again pointing out instructions, mind instructions. He says, now, what you should also consider and look into is, now that I say, you say, oh, you go for refuge, and I say, oh, you should go for refuge. Now you have to investigate. Is it the body or the mind that is going for refuge, that is taking refuge? Then he says, then come back tomorrow and we'll talk more. The boy comes back the next day. Lama, last night, I looked to see whether the one who goes for refuge is body or mind. And I saw that it is neither of the two. I saw that all the parts of my body, from the head down to my feet, each have their own name. So, fingers, palm, joints, wrists, shoulder, right? Ear, nose, each have their names. And then I thought, can it be that the one who goes for refuge is included in all of these parts of my body? Right? If the body is separate from the mind, then the body is just a corpse. It's like, however, if the body is separated from the mind, then the body on itself cannot do anything. It's just like a corpse. So in that case, the body cannot be the one that goes for refuge. Not only that, but if one takes apart all the pieces of that corpse, they each in turn have their own names. So then I turned to look and see if it was the mind. And so the first part he's saying, yeah, it's not the body. So then he said, now I turn to see if it's the mind that goes for refuge. If the mind is given the name, the one who goes for refuge, then it can't also be called mind. Because now you have like two names. He says it cannot be both. Not only that, if a previous mind is called mind, so the first point maybe to us are like, yeah, that's kind of, playing with things, playing with definitions. But then the more important one, I think, is here. Not only that, if a previous mind is called mind, can you then call a later mind the one who goes for refuge? The mind at the time of being the one who goes for refuge then can't be a previous mind or a later mind. Here, mind is not a thing. He's seeing how in each moment, right, there is this fleeting moment of awareness. So if in this moment, this awareness, this consciousness is, oh, I'm taking refuge. So then he's saying, but how is this moment where it says, oh, I'm taking refuge, distinguished from a previous moment where it wasn't saying that? And then in the next moment, it's no longer thinking about that. In the next moment, it's thinking of cats on YouTube. How are these two? right? It says, furthermore, the present mind and the future mind also have their respective names, right? The future mind is the mind that's looking at cats on YouTube. The present mind is the mind that is going for refuge. The previous mind is the mind that is getting ready to look at the mind that is going for refuge. Then it says, if you call both the previous mind and the later mind the one who goes for refuge, then it would never go out of existence. That means it will always be that mind. But that's not the case. So all of the past and future lives that one takes within the 6 classes of beings could be called the one who goes for refuge. But I don't remember my past lives, and I don't know what future lives I will take. Last year's and yesterday's mind have already ceased. In fact, even the last moment have already ceased. And the mind of tomorrow has not arisen. The present mind also changes in every moment. Lama, you know, so please explain this to me. So basically, he is very earnestly, going through, right? Can it be the body? Can it be the mind? Then, of course, those of us have been overeducated or read too much. We don't even investigate. We hear the Lama giving that instruction, then we think, oh yes, in conclusion, not body, not mind. So this example, so in this scenario like this, right, is my example that I like to use is sort of like, when you first learned, right, calculus, right, and algebra, and God, it's so long ago, I don't remember any of the details. I only remember the trauma of learning that. I remember I remember the trauma of how knowing the answer doesn't cut it, right? With a problem set, you have to prove the problem set, and the training arises from the proving, not the in conclusion. Yeah. So same with investigating the mind. In fact, we already know in conclusion, blah blah blah. But we make that mistake and think that it is about in conclusion, blah blah blah. Oh, in conclusion, the mind is beyond all concepts. But that's not where how the Dharma works. The Dharma is in the proving. You have to prove the problem set. Going to the end to look for the answer is useless. In fact, it's already printed there, But you have to prove it. You have to go through it. And so this boy, really earnestly, it's like, is it this? No. Is it that? No. It's neither. But then neither, is there a third option? So then Milarepa responds, the Guru who has realized the nature of selflessness, I respectfully supplicate with my 3 gates. Body, speech, and mind are the 3 gates. To me and all the students to come hereafter, grant your blessings so that we too realize the nature of selflessness. By your compassion, may we emerge from the object of self-clinging. The object of self-clinging in the footnote is talking about the aggregates, the body and the mind. In traditional Buddhist teachings, the self is taught to be falsely imputed upon these 5 skandhas, consisting of one's body, form, and 4 skandhas of mind, sensation, conceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. praying like that, caretaking herder, listen to me. So first, Milarepa, as always, in his longer songs, he invokes the Guru. Then he says, this consciousness that clings to an I. So he begins, right, with consciousness as an experience, not as a concept. So consciousness as an experience is the process or the experience of I making. That means the process of the formation of I. So if you actually look at this sense of I, right, it is, as said earlier, rik rik tur tur, meaning it flickers, it flutters, it darts, it bobs around. Right? Your sense of who you are, you can see how it flutters, it flickers. If the external stimuli is a strong one, then usually a strong I turns up. If the stimulant is a vague one, the I that turns up is also vague. So this consciousness that clings to an I. If you look, you definitely won't be able to see it. Because it's bobbing, because it's flickering, because it's fluttering. You cannot see it, meaning, you're not going to find anything, that you can reliably say, oh, yeah, that must be the I, in a stable way. Not being able to see doesn't mean, right, that there's something to see in the first place, but it also doesn't mean like there's nothing there. It just means that there's nothing stable that you're going to find there. By the power of meditating on Mahamudra, you'll see by not seeing anything at all. So Tilopa said to Naropa, when you're seeing, sees nothing, that is seeing. It's not when you stop seeing, but when you see that nothing can be seen, that is seeing. In a more philosophical way, they explain in Gelugpa writings, the unfindability of the self is what we call emptiness.
Would that be shunyata?
Yeah, emptiness.
No.
The unfindability of self is what we call emptiness. So the unfindability, right? It means it is not like you don't look. You look and you cannot find, the not being able to find. So this is what I'm referring to as proving the problem set. So the finding is the proving. Yeah, you are doing it right when, right, despite your intense energy spent on looking, all you find is that there is nothing to be found. That nothing to be found, that is what we see. So he just says this very briefly, right? Not all this explanation, because he's going to say, in the meditation of Mahamudra, so if you want to practice Mahamudra, then you'll need the ground. And the ground is faith, devotion, and resolve. You need to have confidence that it can be done. You need to be devoted. Devoted, resolved to do it. He says, you need that. On the path, please know the causality of samsara. meaning understand cause and effect clearly. Understand where suffering comes from, where happiness comes from. Then to actualize the final fruition, you'll need the Guru's Abhisheka, transmission, and Upadeshas, meaning the Guru's giving of empowerment, the Guru's transmission, and the Guru's pith instructions. To be a suitable vessel for those, so if that's what you want, then you have to accumulate merit and maintain resolve through both pleasure and pain, persevering even in the face of death. Can you practice like this, my dear young son? If so, you have a karmic propensity. If not, there's no need to explain any further. Again, you should carefully think this over. If you can't find this I that one clings to, then that in itself is the selflessness of persons. Now, if you want to realize the selflessness of phenomena, meaning a even more profound, a deeper realization, then follow me for the next 12 years. If you'll do that, you'll come to understand the mind. My dear young boy, work with mind like that. It's like, do you have 12 years? Can you find a cow sitter for 12 years, you know? And come with me. Yeah. Makes me want to go find a few cows to take care of and hope to run into Milarepa. I could loan a few cows from my god kids' parents, my compadres.
Pretty precocious cow herder too, you know.
Yes. Yeah, so here, the ground of Mahamudra is, in terms of like, so the basis, if you want to practice Mahamudra, for that matter, Dzogchen, whatever, you know, like meaning if you want to get serious about this, first, the basis is faith, devotion, and resolve. Faith and devotion, I don't know what the original Tibetan is, and so I don't know if it is faith, devotion as a compound, or like there are three things there. But if I have to guess, you know, you can think of it as, you know, faith as in like it's referring to like the faith or conviction that you can be free. And that's a very important conviction because so many of us don't believe that we can be free. Mm-hmm. I mean, intellectually, we might say, yeah, I believe, but on the level that matters, you know, we don't believe, we don't have conviction that we can be free, that we can be otherwise, right?
If I could ask, how can I develop that?
Oh, yeah, you know, a big question. Accumulate merit, he says, and maintain resolve through both pleasure and pain, persevering even in the face of death.
Okay, I got it now.
Yes, there is no, you know, special pill to swallow, but it's accumulation of merit. So, you know, like in then, you know, in like when you start training, right? Then it's the guru's job to guide you. Yeah? It's not saying like, you know, until you have faith, devotion, and resolve, you can't go on to the path. And then when you finish the path, you'll come to the fruit. It's ground, path, and fruit. That's the triad that's going on here. It's not saying that. It's saying, here are the crucial things that you've developed, you know, on the level of basis. So you can start off with like, you know, 2% of faith, right? And then, you know, on the path, you can practice 2% of the time, acting clearly based on clear understanding of how karma works. Then, you know, you will get a 2% fruition. Yeah. Then 3% ground, right? 3% path, 3% fruit, right? You can build up, you build up. Yeah. It's not absolute right from the get-go. Yeah? You build up and then they reinforce each other. Right? So then to actualize the final fruition, then you will need empowerment, transmission, and pith instructions. Wang Lung Tri in Tibetan. Then not the superficial, you know, Wang, superficial empowerment, superficial transmission. Oh, Lama, can I have the oral transmission? Here it's talking about something else. Here, empowerment is talking about something else. It's not talking about how many rituals you have gone to where vase is put in your head, you know, alcohol or juice, you know, is you know, drank. Yes.
You know, over all these years, you've given us some instructions without telling us. You know, because we didn't.
Are you accusing me of something?
Yes. And, you know, very grateful for it. So does that count?
Well, you have to, you are the one that decides, you know, in the end, right?
And in the end, the love you bring is equal to the love.
It's an interdependence, you know. And empowerment, you know, like, so my Monday, Wednesday, and Friday class this whole last week, we're looking at this notion of empowerment. And because we're learning one practice called the Samadhi empowerment. And in there, you know, I wanted people to see how the way we think of empowerment these days, it's just completely not what the tantras are talking about when they talk about empowerment. Yeah. So even like, you know, the some of the sound bites that have arisen recently when His Holiness the Dalai Lama announced, you know, this virtual empowerment, you know, for the most part, you know, most people were like, yay, you know, but then there's a vocal minority that say, oh, this is terrible, you know. And this is a deterioration of Vajrayana. And some of them you can tell, I mean, human beings are human beings, you know, some of them are, you know, highly respected teacher. Apparently someone recorded a conversation that was not to be publicized, you know, where this one Lama dismissively, even just the tone that he was talking about the Dalai Lama was very disrespectful. In the bigger picture, I would say, on one level, it's understandable. You know, actually, Tibetan society is still very tight. There is no healthy space to disagree in the Tibetan, contemporary kind of Tibetan world. I'm not talking about Tibetan Buddhism. I'm talking about Tibetan society. There's no healthy space, the way we think about a healthy space to disagree. And so everybody has to like show their loyalties to the Dalai Lama. I'm not saying the Dalai Lama is enforcing this. It's not. It's a cultural forces at play. So then you have scenarios like that, you know. In private, people will use very kind of dismissive way, you know. Like, for example, calling him Dalai Lama, you know, which among Tibetan people, you don't call him Dalai Lama. Maybe just talking to us, you'll say Dalai Lama. Otherwise, it's like, you know, the Buddha, Gyalwa Rinpoche, like the precious conqueror, the wish-fulfilling jewel. You know, those are terms that you use to refer to him, you know. But in this recording, you know, this Lama kind of sneering, yeah, this Dalai Lama, you know, this it might as well be a Dharma destroyer, doing virtual empowerment, blah, blah, blah. So it's unfortunately that got released in public, and the next thing you know, people are threatening to kill this Lama.
So what do you think about the virtual empowerment?
Oh, it's very clear from the things that we were looking at. So we looked at this translation of these teachings given by Tsele Naso Rangdo, a book called Empowerment, a very thin volume published by Tuku Ugyen many years ago. I think Eric Kunzang translated, or Marcia, one of them. At that point, I think they are like indistinguishable who did what.
They were still married then. Yeah.
Yeah, and so the power translators. So that book, Empowerment, if you want to know, the answer to that question, look at that book. It becomes very clear. Then even older, an older text called The Garland of Views by Pema Sambhava. It's very clear that empowerment is not the ritual, especially among Kagyu Nyingmas. Empowerment is not the ritual. Empowerment is basically gaining understanding. So for empowerments, there are 4 basic empowerments: the vase empowerment, secret empowerment, wisdom knowledge empowerment, and word empowerment. So when Tsele Naso Rangdo talks about vase empowerment, which is what he focuses on a lot, he says the meaning of the vase empowerment is when you finally get it, right? That this 5 aggregates of body and mind are nothing but the mandala of deities. And he says, when you finally get that point, however you get that point, whoever facilitates you getting that point right there, that is when empowerment has taken place. And in fact, in that section, he says, conversely, if you lay out a sand mandala called powdered mandala, the size of the world, and have hundreds and thousands of bumpas placed on your head, you're not going to receive any empowerment if that point isn't born in your heart. That this body itself, this mind and body itself, this basic constitution of the basis of imputing I, here, Milarepa here, the object of self-clinging. This object of self-clinging, this body, mind, is nothing but the mandala of deities. That is the vase empowerment.
So could you plan maybe an empowerment for us with somebody?
So that's the trick question. But no, it's not. It's not who you can find. It's not,
But I mean, to do like a weekend for
yeah. But the thing is, we all have received empowerments many times in terms of the ritual. So now what we need to develop is a clearer and more stable, and like Jim's question, faith and conviction that this is the mandala of deities.
I understand. I understand that.
Yes.
But I just that's yes or no.
Yeah,
I'm just wondering. Just wondering. Yeah.
Yes. Wait, what are you wondering? Continue. Sorry. Repeat, rather.
I mean, I'm wondering, like, if Teresa Rinpoche, who I've met, that I've, would love to have an empowerment with, could we, like, do a weekend empowerment? Teaching. If we could just say teaching.
Well, you have to ask them. I cannot answer that question for you.
They're your friends, though.
Yes, still no, Again, the point is not who.
Okay, not who, but I mean just.
You just need to work on understanding that this is that is the basis of self.
So you're saying, all the hippies from the 60s and 70s, now they're so gendized that, now they think they don't need to read anything, that they, are to the point where they're just in Rigpa all the time.
Oh, yes.
We've got, we have kind of that phase.
Yes.
Everybody's in a different phase.
Yes.
And on one day I'm in this phase, and on the next day I'm in another phase.
Yes. So what to do, right?
Keep it simple. It's my best answer.
Yeah,
and know that I'm right where I need to be. To know that, I'm here because this is where I need to be. I don't need to be in, Miami or, this is where I'm meant to be. This is where I am.
Yes.
And yes, more than anything, I just learn and grow, and I love your class so much, being with each and every person here. And I think we all have something to offer for each other. So this is, my point, my baseline. But I like to get your opinion sometimes.
Yeah. So anyway,
ask outside of
answering that.
Do you see that box that I'm in?
What box?
Sometimes I like to ask outside of the box.
Anyway, in answering that question,
and we need to go to the 12 steps.
This whole question about virtual empowerment and all that, to me it's very clear, all this talk about oh, you're destroying the Dharma, da 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 da. Actually, if you can make a valid point about doing this will destroy the Dharma, okay, but then if you are going to make that point, then that has already happened a long time ago. So like Medicine Square, 50,000 people, Kalachakra, right? We've already gone down that road, and didn't start in Medicine Square. It started in Lhasa. Yeah. And then when did it start? Oh, it started even further back, and further back and further back. So if you want to go down that road, then it's hypocritical to say, oh, the Dalai Lama doing things like this, it's like publicizing the Vajrayana. Guess what? If you want to go down that road, we have gone way down that road.
I ignore all that stuff you guys say. I ignore all of that.
Yeah. So then anyway, back here, when Milarepa says, you need the Guru's Abhisheka, transmission, and Upadeshas. Yeah. There, what I might want to, clarify there is, Milarepa is not talking about one-time ritual. He's talking about this heart relationship, this heart connection, whereby to be empowered, right? Which is what Abhisheka is, empowerment. To be empowered is to be empowered. Whenever that power starts plugging into you and you go, woof, that's when you are empowered. With or without vases, with or without mandalas, with or without ritual. Then to have the transmission, right? It's like when that life force, is animating your practice. Then I have the transmission. And that, of course, is not always going to be strong, like fleeting, hopping, bopping, right? You have it. And then the pith instructions. Right? And then when all of that comes together, then he says, you have the means to actualize the final fruit of practice. So this particular section here, is really good. It goes back and forth further to the end of this chapter. So next time when we meet, we will look at the rest of this encounter. Meanwhile, you can read more on it.
Okay.
Okay.
Love you.
Hasta mañana.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, Aish,
Bye.
Oh, there she is.
There she is.
we love you. I love you.
Bye.